Back, I'm going to continue on with Just Gonna Let Them Hate by Story Kitty 013, Chapter 4 on Make You Scream. I probably won't be able to post as much as I don't post that much anyways, but school just started for me, 2 days ago. I just had my freshman orientation, and just yesterday I had my first half day, so yeah, and it was terrible. The entire school was an absolute maze. I could not find my way around, and the only really good thing about it was my health science class. I honestly knew nothing about it when I first signed up for it, but it's basically just a pathway to becoming a nurse, so that's cool. But I'm just gonna get started. Chapter 4, I'll Make You Scream, present. So, I'm sure you're wondering how I got in this position. Among other things, Fury responded dully to the boy covered in silly string, spray paint, and glitter. Honestly, it hadn't even surprised me at this point. But after a year of knowing Peter Parker, he just knew that it was things that would happen to him that would definitely surprise him far more than this. Well, Nicholas, as my good friend says, when you hit rock bottom, you can trace it back to one big bad decision that fucks it all up, Peter said, almost sagely. Slender fingers pointed in air as he recounted this stupid nonsense true quote. It looked ridiculous in the mask with glitter on it. Is this rock bottom? Fury raised an uninterested eyebrow. He was expecting a little more blood. No, actually, he expected a lot more blood, maybe a buttload or two? Maybe a few fingers or dead bodies out in a shitload of fire. Physically, not really. Socially, you could hear a smile in his voice as he waved his hand in a so-and-so motion. He seemed to be gesturing bigger with his hands today. You need me? Ignoring the way Fury stared at him like he was demanding answers by changing the topic. If he had questions, which he didn't voice them though, verbally. Even though Parker knew the questions he wanted to ask, he was just a little shit like that. Get in and try not to get glitter everywhere, Fury said, not even gesturing to his car as he got into the driver's seat. He hesitated before climbing into the front seat next to him, fidgeting a little in his place, despite Fury's request not to mess up the sleek back BMW. We have a mission, he squeaked, a little too high for it to be intentional, and Fury raised another eyebrow. The kid was usually never had reservations about missions of the adventure, no matter what, even if they treated him like shit, or he had just been run over by a train. When he was available, he came. What's up, kid? You usually are never embarrassed, Fury sent a smirk his way. Peter almost faltered for a second, which should have been a red flag, because the kid had no filter between brain and mouth. I usually don't have anything to be embarrassed about, he said honestly, as if observing that fact of him that made Fury snort at how casually he said it as he pushed the kid in the front seat. Despite him not wanting to get glitter everywhere, that gained a surprised but nonetheless delighted laugh out of him. Fury had only had a small smile on his face. They were sure that Parker noticed, but didn't comment on it. Peter was weird like that, commenting on every little thing that didn't matter, and that was annoying. But it was nice that he knew small things were and enjoyed them in peace. Parker needed more small good things in his life, but Fury would never admit that he thought that. Yeah, 'cause a bright red and blue spandex is nothing to be embarrassed about, Fury said back with no heat, just an amused tinge in his voice. Peter made a mock offended noise. Wow, I'm taking offense, you know what? I'm fucking proud of my glitter, Peter declared, and then the bone-dread tiredness of the past 4 days sunk in. He had slept. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. He was tired and he could feel it. He could also feel the growling at his stomach, but he sucked it in, the growling, until he could get to a place where the noise would be drowned out. He knew Fury would notice in a near, silent, and almost soundproof car. Peter skiffed his feet on the rubber flooring of the car, smearing glitter and tarn. Do you really need me today? something in the kid's whiny voice was tired. It almost made Fury stop, but only because it had entered his voice, and let the kid off the hook for the voice. Depends on what happened, Fury said casually and shrugging, referring to his obvious new paint job he had with his suit. Peter huffed quietly as he leaned on his elbow on the window and rested his head on his hand, not looking at Fury but out his window. "You fall asleep for 15 minutes, Peter grumbled indignantly. Fury wasn't sure if he was supposed to hear that or not, but that actually made him buck out a quick, amused laugh. Peter looked owlishly over at the sound before realizing what he said wasn't going to let him off the hook, but only made him look stupider. Then went back to sulking in his previous position with a loud huff. "Yeah, kid, you ain't getting out of this one," he said with a playful smirk. Even if he didn't really have to say it, he just wanted to rub it in. Peter responded by laying out a whine and squirming in his chair, looking like a kid, also trying to find a comfortable position for the rest of his body. He wouldn't complain anymore. He was too old to complain. He was too old to cry. Eventually they got to the tower. Peter dragged his glitter-coated feet and slowly swing after him, and Fury was 89% sure he was doing it on purpose. As soon as he walked into the briefing, Fury almost regret not saying the kid could be let off the hook this time, because the team needed him for this mission, for all of these missions. Even if they didn't know it, even if Peter didn't know it either, and was only here to be a little shit, Fury wasn't going to let a little sparkles get away of saving the damn world again. Even as Sam and Clinton fell down laughing, crying, and the kid hunched in a little before pulling back to slouch his height. "I don't even know what to say," Sam said, laughing so hysterically he was nearly crying. The kid still wouldn't take off his mask, but he hunched in again a little before straightening himself out. "There's too many things to say," he fluttered. And Fury noticed that everyone who wasn't sniffing the latter was giving him an evil eye. Rogers and Romanoff. That's because I can actually pull this off," Peter said, snarkily crossing his arms over his chest as if he was satisfied with himself. Fury had to hand it to the kid. He was a cowboying this like a champ. But he wasn't out of the woods yet. In fact, this was the only beginning. "Do you think this is some kind of joke?" Romanoff said a bit venomously, and Fury could tell that Peter rolled his eyes on the mask like everything he did was reprimanded by the older Spider-themed superhero. She probably did, because Romanoff held Parker at a high standard, especially now that he knew about Kid. "Yeah, a bunch of punks pulled a practical prank on me. I bet I look hilarious," Peter said back, as if he was a punk himself. Not defiantly, though, as if it should have been. Just curious that he meant all of the tridge of sarcasm that only he seemed to be young enough to pull off. Honestly, he probably was the only kid who could pull even that off. Hell, he was never going to be old enough to not pull it off the way his lifestyle was. He was like a mix between a kid and a very mature 19-year-old. There was no in-between, and Fury had a feeling that he was going to say this by 2 years 70. "How did a bunch of kids pull prank on you?" Steve asked confusedly, striding over the Parker Peter to stand a few feet in front of him like a kid was a soldier and he was a disappointed commander. And it did not matter how much Rogers wanted that. It wouldn't happen as long as the kid had a shitty list such people I have to fuck with agenda. Didn't you notice he crossed his arms? Peter mimicked the motion, but hunching a little more than Rogers, stretching. "That was a very good question." Parker's senses were above even super soldiers. He must have noticed them. "I fell asleep," he sighed, which he did. He passed out from exhaustion because he hadn't found a good place to sleep in 3 days, and Matt was out of town, and Wayne was being Wayne, but like in Canada, and he couldn't ask Will Weasel to crash on his couch in the bar without being accusing suspicion, because he missed out all of last week there, because Weasel was fucking rat and went out Peter to Wayne if he found out he didn't have a home because he missed the lease on a storage spot. And Weasel was a glorified cow. Don't get me wrong, he owed the guy for a job. But as soon as you were snapped in his remote direction, he would give everything he knew in a heartbeat. On the job, Tony snorted mockingly, and Peter huffed a little. It wasn't entirely his fault. His job didn't really stop or had a time frame. It just kind of happened. So Peter elegantly put it. Not like the Avengers. You try protecting a city, maintaining a paycheck, and being hounded by literally everyone in the goddamn world 24/7 stock. You have the ability to go to sleep. It's a choice for you not to take care of yourself. Peter didn't have the damn time to take care of himself, which would be a problem, but he was fine. It was simply a luxury he could not afford, both mentally and financially. But who needs to be healthy when you have energy drinks and painkillers? Health is so stupid. I don't think that part has anything to do with you. Peter shot back defensively, maybe a little more snappish than he wanted to be. That should have been a warning sign for you. So gracefully ignored. And if you think that glitter intentional, Generobia, or the bunch of conservative assholes who really suck it up and get broke. Poor Catholics must be confused by all hell right now, but honestly, that outburst, which was uncalled for on multiple accountabilities, should have really made the heads turn to something was wrong with Peter. But here they were, still ignoring the fact that there was something wrong with the kid. It's more of an age thing, but take your pick, I guess. Tony replied with a shrug, not as all affected by the comment like most of the ad Avengers. Natasha wasn't either, but she wasn't amused by it. Hey, if you like, they don't need, then you too. Peter gave Eve an affirmative nod, like he was satisfied with the answer. Thank you, he said, waiting as if that was the end of the conversation. Watch apparently had headphones, so it made the kid even more saturated and snappish when he went to tell Peter off again. Soldiers should wear appropriate attire for training. Their fighting on it matters and shows how well you actually take your job seriously. Raj was digging his own grave now. Well, it was good knowing him. He really should have let stock end it. He seems to know how to take a hint. Okay, let me stop you right there, Peter said, cutting off the good captain off in the most unnecessary blunt way, while again returning address of each statement. 1. I'm not a soldier. I don't like being told what to do because I'm a teenager and all that rubbish shit. B. No, I do not care that I said shit. It's a word. It ain't gonna give you getting sassy. I take personal offense if you think that I've taken this, he gestured to the Avengers. Seriously, Arnold. And not my freaking frankly, I'm appalled that you think that you even suggest a thing. Peter finished off and walked past Rogers right to the window and sit on it. Rovanoff stiffened a little, probably was thinking her decision to recruit him, but it was too late, despite all that he said, and maybe it was even true. Peter did take his job seriously sometimes. This wasn't a walk in the park for me either. So without any further introductions, can we get this over with? Because my clothes have a hot day with dry cleaner. Glitter's really, really itchy. Phoebe wasn't sure how to respond to that. For a kid covered in glitter and tinsel, he did a good fucking job. He cleaned up the trash like he normally did, maybe even better because even robots seem to underestimate a 5'5" person and spend next to it sparkles. Definitely faster than normal, if he was honest. Parker must really want to take a shower or something, and Fury couldn't blame him. He could still kick the ass though. It was at the end of the fight that Fury finally knows something. Through the swinging and kicking and punching and lasers and bullets, the kid was getting sluggish. Much quicker than he knew he did. And Spidey was the last to get sluggish about it because he seemed to have an inhuman energy sense, lazily changing webs with heavy limbs and swinging higher to avoid fighting uneasily. Gets to save civilians only. He didn't bother with robots that were doing anything this time. Sometimes even completely skipping over pods of them if an Avenger was needed to deal with it. I mean to kick the robots off their feet when they bothered civilians instead of actually engaging and fighting them hand to hand in ways that would put them out of commission for good instead of just throwing them off the game. It worked and he did his job. it just wasn't normal for him to pick them off like this. Usually he crawl them and fight them all at once. Fight them all almost at once. By the time they got back to the Avengers Tower, the glitter had mostly been shaking off, leaving him a very sparkly battlefield wherever he had fought or swung over. They were still stuck in crevices and indents that he had left in the robots. The kid looked almost out of breath, managed to keep stay straight, and his breathing was almost so normal, but his chest was moving too fast and his movements were janky and slow. It took Fury a minute to realize he was witnessing Spider-Man being tired. When he did, it nearly knocked him off his feet of shock, because even though it was a perfectly normal thing for a person to be tired afterward, the kid usually wasn't easy worn out, much less showed it the way he was. He was seemingly had an infinite reserve for just that, among other and this supply of facts about STEM methods and achievements that he was sure not even Sog knew, and endless questions that somehow made their ways in the format of his mind in most inappropriate times, leaving when he was trying to focus to go to sleep. Mission successful, but a certain voice that somehow ignored the child who was slouching in his seat the entire meeting. But finally, the huge hieroglyphic heads turned to address Spider-Man directly, and the kid, too out of it to notice all the heads turned him, probably thinking that he was out of the hook when they did immediately bash him for it, allowing his guard to loosen, which also never happened. And now Fury was kind of getting worried, but you never admit that. Just enough to make him sold out his code name. We reviewed the footage in your entire. They really say it like that. Everyone knew you. Look at the goddamn you princess had thrown up on him and threw him in a pit of glitter. Fury winced at the noticeable bits of glitter still struck to the boy, seeming to amplify the sparkle under the light of the conference room. It is less exemplary. While we can reductively tolerate your inconsolence and rash disrespect to rules for sake of our respect for your director, this is clear disrespect to our entire standing. He said harshly, letting his voice spit out a poorly disguised insult. Fury thought he saw Peter flinch a little as the voice rose a bit. You should be more grateful we don't arrest you and send you to the raffle. We did an icebox. You're getting more out of hand than Fury the Forder implies, and with no explanation, your kindness always noted to be on the other side of the law. Another council member, as if Parker wasn't even human enough to be considered a person. Their family wasn't sure. Although Fury wasn't sure himself, that made Peter bristle, and the others wince. Peter did have a thing about mutant rights. Although he never defended himself, he always defended others. But Fury didn't think the Avengers knew that. At least they were empathetic enough to know that the council members have crossed the line. Why don't you? Haven't you? If I'm so much trouble, then why not send me? He growled out with so much poison it took even Rovanoff off guard. It was deadly and scary, and said that they had definitely crossed the line. The council wisely decided not to answer, and so quickly found his autopilot and ended the call. But that was all he seemed to be able to do until Peter lifted a spell. That's what I thought. He crossed his arms for half, and all the tension and malice that was building around him and starting to rest of the room seemed to vanish in an instant. Fury silently breathed, as did the rest of the Avengers. Sure, the council members stepped out of line, even the Avengers could see that, but what in the ever-loving fuck was that? Peter didn't seem to notice the unmasked question, or didn't humor them with an answer as he slumped further into his chair, with no doubt a pout under the mask. What's the icebox? Sam asked a bit after that, the poor soul. Peter didn't answer him, though, only managed to look childishly upset with the mask on. It's a place where they send mutants and inhumans if they do illegal things, Natasha managed to answer. And it was an understatement. That place was a literal hellhole of the worst kind of psychopaths. Definitely no place for a kid. But that summed it up as far as a person who wasn't even a human. Wasn't either a mutant or already in the loop. needed to know. I'm surprised they threatened a kid with it. It's brutal that Tony stated with thoughtful honesty. But I think he could detect a bit of concern. Fury was sure was that Fury was his fair share of concern too. Why the fuck were they threatening Parker with prison now? Natasha studied the kid for a second, planning his mood and motives, trying to figure out what was going on in that brain. No good luck to her, because not even Fury could figure out that mystery. Why didn't they just say to Ralph? That's what they used for. Sam asked, confused, not getting the hint to shut up about. Yes, well, there are mutants in the Avengers. The Ralph was made under U.S. government jurisdiction, and the icebox was a UN thing that was a whole lot shittier and way more of a threat than Ralph could ever be. They didn't threaten me with the Ralph because they don't have Peter trailed off, not speaking loudly enough for him to be heard by everyone in the room, but everyone heard anyways. Natasha managed to look surprised. She must have figured out that Fury wasn't looking for Peter. Straighten a bit when all eyes were on him. They don't have power dampers. Their hats don't count as meditations because that's muscle reconstruction. In my case, I was Peter paused, like he didn't want to answer the question, but he already dug himself in a hole too deep, and everyone was expecting to finish now. My DNA was mutated as well as the green powers. If your hands your DNA doesn't change, he gestured to Steve and then shrugged. It wasn't what he was going to say before. It probably censored, and that's what he would have said. It gave it away. Timmy's vigilance. They take your powers? Clint asked, a little confused. But Fury knew that Clint wasn't surprised by the fact they took powers away. He was surprised that they threatened to take a child's powers away. Barton might not be a mutant, but he knew that a mutant's health was based on their powers too, especially a child's. It's not that bad. Just feel a little sick, because it's really okay. Peter cut himself off, not to share the good stuff. Even after a year they've been together, although it wasn't a really productive year in the terms of personal strength between the Avengers and Parker. Just take the mask off, kid. Very ordered. Sick of trying to read the kid with the mask on and spitballing his feelings. Peter sighed and took it off, not arguing, but Fury could tell he didn't want to do it. He regretted asking the kid to do it immediately. Now, Fury looking at Parker's mask-free face, regretting letting him come on the mission now. He looks like shit, to put it lightly. His face was hollow, like he hadn't had a good meal in a while. His dark, nearly black eye bags under his eyes, like he hadn't gone to sleep in the past month. He was trying to wet his drying lips to pass the awkward showcase of his exhaustion. What was holding the kid together? Well, this has been nice, but I've got to go, Peter said with mock friendly voice, and beeline for the elevator, not trying to look at the Avengers in fear of their temporary standard state would evaporate before he could go. Unfortunately for him, it did. Steve stood in front of him before he could get the last 5 strides. Everyone was kind of weaving away. He managed to get Peter to stop and not go around or dodge like he would have if he wasn't so tired. Peter sighed like he was expecting it, but still a little surprised when Rogers moved his arm. When Peter tilted his head to look up at his goal, that means I had to go, because go as in leave. Peter explained, like trying to get the man to move. Only had to only move around him once. Yeah, and this means I'm not letting you go, as in stay. Steve shot back, and if Peter wasn't surprised before, he was sure now. Captain America sassing him into saying it looked enough to make him freeze every limb and look at the older man with wide raccoon eyes. Why? He asked in a curious, childish way, tilting his head on slightly like a toddler asking why the sky was blue or how birds fly. That voice couldn't be coupled with those tired eyes. How long have you been awake? Steve asked and said in his commander voice, and to his credit, not being visibly shocked in the contrast of appearance Parker had been giving all since he came in. It was like he thought it was the only thing Peter would respond to, which rude, and no, he was not responding to that voice last of anything. I told you I was pranked when I tried, because I was sleeping. Peter furrowed his eyebrows, like he didn't understand why Steve was asking a question. Steve mimicked the look, taking a second longer to answer. "'Cause you passed out?" Bruce stepped in suddenly, his deadpan voice bringing relief to the order and professionalism the conversation that Peter couldn't seem to wipe out. Peter whipped his head around to Doctor. "I did not pass out, I just wanted to sleep," Peter retorted. "It was intentional, completely, and totally on purpose." He half crushed thumbs, like a child would. "Yeah, sure, kid," Tony snorted in disbelief. "You seriously need sleep, and that's coming from me." He looked at the kid, screwed up his nose as if Stark was saying the kid, and he said then he probably needed a week worth of it. "And a bath," he added, and Fury couldn't help but agree. Peter grinned at him, but the look had no heat. "And some food," Bruce said helpfully. Or not so helpfully, because Peter's eyes grew panicked and for some reason, but Banner didn't seem to catch on as he went on. "Really, just rest, why don't you?" "Bye," Peter said, backing up to the near window and opening it and jumping out, as he probably would have before, and had he not been too tired to notice it, the Avenger sighed. 5 years earlier. James Bucky Bond was fucking
Красная.
the man she loved and had been searching for was Steve Rogers' best friend, and now Steve was asking her to try and find him because he got a tip off about the Winter Soldier that Natasha has been assuming, and she originally asked him for help, but then they found out the identity of the soldier. Now Steve was asking her to make a different call and not to kill him, like she was ever going to kill him in the first place. So she agreed, because she wasn't sure if she was ready to confess her feelings just yet. She wasn't ready to tell Steve about the Red Room and Hydra. She wasn't ready to tell Steve about their child. Hell, she didn't even know if she was ready to tell Bucky. She was mad at Steve for making her do this. Mad, even if she wanted to. Mad at Clint for not being there for her defense. Mad at Barnes for leaving her with her son alone, even if he had no choice and he didn't know. That son. Even the bunker. Even the bunker, she looked him directly in the eye. He stared at her like he'd seen a ghost, trying to remember her as they were pointing guns to each other's heads. He couldn't remember, even if he promised, and Natasha felt angry that he'd forgotten the promise too. Steve not too far from her, trying to coax him, but then the gun to tell him that she was a friend, as if they should already know each other, but it didn't work. His eyes fixated on her, and only her painful memory trying to escape and come to light to remember who she was. She could tell he was trying to have a memory of her. She knew she looked familiar to her. That haunted look in his eyes was clouded by confusion, like he needed confirmation. She rolled her eyes, put her gun away, and walked to him. Steve stopped talking to him as she strutted up quickly. Soon it took into almost running. The feeling, emotion, and pain made her go fast, and she wasn't sure if she wasn't crying right now, but she didn't care. She was running to her love, her family, the family she built in hell, the family she wouldn't stop trying to find, the family she loved and lost. Slowly it would come together again. This was just proof of hope. It wasn't all for nothing. He didn't shoot her. He wouldn't shoot. He pulled the trigger as she walked up, but he had a panic look in his eyes, like he wasn't prepared for whatever he was going to do. He didn't know what to do. He froze, like he hadn't shot when he kissed him long and hard. "Natalia," he said. It was confirming that when she didn't answer. "Natasha," he said, and she smirked against his lips, saying the confirmation as he kissed back repeatedly, more gently. Finally remembered. She asked when they broke apart. "I thought it was unforgettable," she said snarkily, smiling in a way that made her heart melt. His heart melt. She missed that smile. "You are," he said, and looked at her before the smile turned frown. She raised an eyebrow. eyebrow. I have to go. He was about to pull away when she gripped his arms tighter. She couldn't lose him again. Not to this cruel world. No, you can't. She said almost frantically. She didn't know how she was going to tell them. She thought he was dead, and therefore he wouldn't. And then found out he wasn't, and then went on a submission to find him now. But now she was here, and he was looking at her, begging her to give him a reason to stay, and she did. We have a son. She heard Steve gasp, because he must have been quietly confused the entire time at the interaction between the two assassins. Bond didn't know how to respond, stay stony and cold. She could tell days immediately, and she still had a lot of explaining to do. Present. Fury dragged the kid more often than not. It wasn't a worrying fact. It was a clear observation. The kid allowed himself to be dragged, as if he didn't want to go, but he also didn't really care. It really didn't seem like much of a chore, since he was so small. It was normal for them at this point. I believe the first time he did it, this benches was done in the science for a minute. I mean, who wouldn't be surprised by the esteemed director Shield dragging a punk teen in Spinx into an Avenger meeting? There were a million questions when Peter first joined the team. None of them were really asked verbally. Even few were answered by neither Peter or Fury. It didn't really join, more like help and then disappeared for a week or two. It was just take the kids talk. Peter hadn't protested to it, although he had side-eyed the window, and Tony was pretty sure he wanted to make a break for him out the fucking window. Tony didn't know back then that the kid would jump out of a 70-story building and still be fine, so he thought that he was suicidal. Crossed his mind for a second, and then the second thought was, why the fuck does Fury have a kid? His third thought was, why is Fury giving me a kid? In hindsight, he probably would have wondered who the kid was. He was so caught up with the fact that he was a kid, he didn't really have time to render on it. But Fury would answer his question, so he took to the Popsberry suicide kid to the mission room. He wasn't exactly wrong. The first mission they had together, he didn't try to listen to Steve, just threw his small body at the freaking alien robot centipede that was shooting lasers directly at him, and somehow he got out of that situation visually unscathed. But after the mission, he was yanked to the side by Steve on the jet to get lectured on. Turn on your goddamn comm. Peter looked at him confused and didn't say anything for the first 3 minutes, so Steve's yelling got louder and the kid face got more confused, and Tony couldn't help but notice he wasn't scared of yelling. In fact, it seemed like he was used to it. When Tony looked closer, he noticed something else. The kid generally didn't understand why he was being yelled at, and Tony had to give props to him for not answering or snapping at Steve sooner, because when you're being yelled at by Captain America or any adult for matter, at least when you're a kid, you don't think you've done we just did and just assume you did something wrong. Not this kid. Fuck calm, he interrupted, finally giving out and trying to find out what with the context shows. Steve went silent and stunned, and didn't seem to be moving anytime soon. They must have been a new record, and Tony finally thought, who was this kid? Although not under the previous circumstances, so possible within the first meeting. He was quietly taken him back to his side by Clint, because Steve was currently in a mix between illiterate and guilt-ridden to explain himself for yelling at a teenager for very minutes straight for his own mistake. To explain the comm system they set up in the battle. The kid didn't cry though, not even close. He didn't seem sad at all, just neutral, maybe bored. Captain's speech hadn't affected him in the least. The kid was a mystery. Tony made a mental list for Peter Parker. 1, he always seemed to pick on things really easily. It was quite literally impossible to sneak up on him. He noticed even Natasha didn't notice at times. He noticed that even Natasha didn't notice sometimes. 2, he would also seem to be even more on the rebellious side of independent, but he also followed orders when he wanted to. Sometimes he wasn't even out of rebellion. Actually, it's mostly not fulfilling. Okay, he was independent. 3. He'd throw himself in front of anything that harms, even a stray cat, especially a stray cat, actually. He goes for a lot of stuff that does the most damage first. Tony had been on over 30 missions with him, and that was the only thing that was consistent. He followed orders when he felt like it, but it was hard to tell when he would. He didn't have a particular mood for following orders. He just did it or didn't do it. So it was mostly a toss-up whether or not he'd actually listen. Either way, he got his job done exceedingly well, despite what everyone said to him that he screwed up, which no, he only actually screwed up orders. So Tony never told him because that was less casualties, but despite his own things, so he wouldn't reprimand the kid for doing his job well. But he also wouldn't stop the others from lecturing him about orders. Sometimes Tony thinks the kid was actually playing them all fools, because even though he was a kid supposedly dropped out of school for this superhero vigilante gig going on, Parker wasn't stupid. The opposite, in fact. He was clever, quick thinking, and seemingly to format 10 consistent plans for even when he thought the original plan would go balls up. He always expected every plan to go balls up, which was smart, but was infuriating, because he never had any faith in even his own plans. He just never had any faith in plans, period. He never really showed anything intelligence-wise, but in battle smarts, Tony had figured out that it took some kind of calculation for the Rebs to hit where he wanted to every single time. There was no way he was so lucky to have 100% accuracy without any form of basic math or physics, but none of the basic checks for web swinging. Peter talked too much, but he never gave anything away. It was infuriating when you try and read him or dig up something personal, and the math certainly didn't help when trying to know his motions. If his conversation got too personal, Tony never really found the line, but he knew he was close. Peter would just change the subject, jump out window, or off the roof. It really depended on his mood, location, and weather. He also seemed to know exactly what everyone was going to say, and exactly how to read the room. Like Natasha, but the kid was married, could speak 70 miles an hour to a criminal while rubbing them up. The only way that Tony found this out was observing the kid for literally 5 seconds instead of yelling at him immediately upon his arrival. He knew what he was going to say, even when to say it and how to say it, when he say what he wanted without any regard to the consequences, but he also knew what the consequences were and just didn't give a shit. It was terrifying. The kid never really stopped talking, even when nobody was listening. He seemed content with talking to himself or other voices that was in his head. Tony was 56% sure there were voices in his head, but Tony was gonna judge. He had a lot of voices in his head too. Quiet voices that never really talked but didn't really leave you alone. Maybe that was just him. He doubted Steve had a voice in his head telling him to build, work, build, and shit. Tony had called him through the comms once, yelling at something that wasn't that. That probably was the maddest he ever seen the kid. He was the happiest when he was talking to someone who didn't really yell back, mainly that came in the form of a dog, cat, or a domestic animal. Hell, they didn't even have to be domestic. Tony had found the kid holding a decent conversation with a raccoon once when they were waiting for the evacuation to arrive. Tony never mentioned it. The first time Tony was scared of him when he came stumbling behind Fury after a mission back. He ripped up hoodie and I stare at the floor. He was quite calculating and angry. It was the most terrifying thing he ever experienced. As soon as Parker walked into the room, all conversations stopped. The air got too thick, and everyone could tell there was something seriously wrong. It was chilling and daunting, but the scariest part was that when he noticed the bench who hadn't been looking at him except for Tony, the tension and ice in the air just vanished into thin air, and the room seemed to brighten up again, and the kid slapped on a smile that Tony thought was his actual smile. It seemed so real. He was probably being talkative, but Tony watched him as he didn't seem to notice when he was talking to himself 300 miles per hour. It was like an automatic thing, a thing he did when to distract himself and made comfort himself. They all had their quirks and coping mechanisms, so Tony wasn't going to judge. So in conclusion, Peter Parker was a child. Case closed, right? he knew he couldn't be more wrong. He had to be dragged to things, not intentionally screaming, but definitely willing. But that he didn't want to deal with. He didn't like following rules if not because he thought he was right, then piss someone off, whether it be the Avengers, government officials, criminals, agents, etc. He was talkative and rambled too much about anything, really, especially dog breeds. He was powerful, cunning, and could slap together a decent plan. But those combined with his childhood antics made for embarrassing and amusing first impressions. Like an older teenager, but to the max. He wasn't even sure why the hell Fury wanted to introduce him to the King of Wanda. It was a bad fucking idea. And this kid was so controversial with strangers he could start a war. Although he was never rude, actually, he was probably the most open-minded and accepting guy Tony had ever met. But that wasn't what he was worried about. Probably because he was going to the next mission with them in a week, and his sister Sherry would stay here with Harley. They seemed to have kicked it off. Some sort of science nerdy thing together. He loved this kid. T'Challa was already talking to Steve, probably about Bucky Barnes' returns, which was in a few days, if not mistaken. And Sherry was doing the same with Harley, but on a more excited level. They were just waiting on Fury. He was probably dragging along the kid who the last time we saw him was a week ago when he was tired and covered in glitter, and was the dictionary definition of misery. This time he looked more rested, although still sleepy but not exhausted. He was in a NASA hoodie and Hello Kitty PJ pants. It was the first time we seen him without a Spider-Man suit, one variation of a costume, professional gear, one would go vigilante in. He looked too much like a kid to be a person who fought alien robots. He looks like a fucking teenager. And yeah, he always looks like a teenager, but using costume and webs and tech damped its effects. Like, he wasn't really a kid, just a kid. But the hoodie he was wearing was too big for him, and sleeves went over his hands, faded letters that he could barely make out as NASA. The Hello Kitty pants was soft pink and also 2 sizes too big. The kid pulled the drawstring as high as it could go, because the 2 heartstring pinks were dangling between his legs, and the shoes were quite literally dirty, and toenail pairs was grey Converse, and the soles and areas were duct taped. He had a ratty black transport backpack on his back, and one strap was broken. There was also a duct tape holding that together all over. He looked like a normal teenager of a low class status, and that was what he really was, right? Wasn't he? A kid from Queens who sketchboarded with his friends and went to school. That's what he should have been, at least. He looked irritated and tired, but not as tired or miserable as last time. Tired like someone who woken them up from a nap kind of tired, and that was severely better than about to clap from exhaustion and starvation tired. At least this time he was still not clean and not tracking glitter everywhere. Although he still looked like he could use a meal too. You know, there's a literal king in the room. Clint still started addressing the kid, as no one seemed to notice the entry besides Tony and definitely Tasha. The rest of the Avengers, including the King and Princess and Harley, turned to them, and Peter huffed a little. Either it was in defense or defiance, he wasn't sure, and crosses his spread out arms. Oh my god, he looked adorable across his arms. He wasn't sure if he was trying to be intimidating but if he felt like catastrophically. He looked like a goddamn puppy. I know what Peter said, a little red, tilting his cheeks. I don't think he was serious, he muttered himself, probably referring to Fury. T'Challa raised an eyebrow at his parents, but decided not to comment. If he was confused as to why the Avengers hadn't hopped on him for less than appropriate parent attire, then Tony wouldn't be surprised. The last time you would pick, it was an accident. Why did I get the feeling this was on purpose? Tony faced like a question, his attempt to be subtle about the fact that Peter had often got himself in many faction disasters, and this was not one of them. T'Challa seemed grateful for it and smiled at him with a gentle, calm smile. That smile should be used for therapy. I was sleeping in this asshole, he gestured wildly to Fury behind him. Woke me up like I blocked you You for a reason bastard. Take it a hint, he got Psalms. And Fury didn't seem phased at the least. Did the kid often mock the director of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Like, what other things could a dropout do? He was 15 and couldn't get a job. All he could do was rescue cats and help old ladies all day. If the cat is not criminal and odd civilian, right? You sleeping for 3 days, he said in monotone, and Parker shot a mean glare at him with no actual heat. Tony could testify to being cranky after taking a nap, but a nap did not last 3 days. That was a fucking coma. The king seemed amused by this, was laughing a deep, quiet chuckle. Parker didn't seem to know, so he carelessly continued. Just in case you sleep with one eye open does not mean the rest of us don't have to sleep. We don't all come from the deeps of hell where reaction and warm zones exist, you know. Peter replied to what Tony could only describe as a teenager tone. Nice kid, preach. And you didn't change because Steve was probably pissed off at the entire too, but not commenting, because last time he did, it was clearly and definitely not his fault, although it did seem like it was fault this time. But you never know with Peter Parker, and Tony leaves a fully starting to understand that after a year. Peter looked like he was about to drop some mad wisdom. Oh, this would be fun. I gave up and decided to hit fuck it for the 6th time this week, Peter nodded. Seemingly satisfied with the answer, Steve sighed and quietly apologized to the very amused king and the not so resident Spiderling. For Tony barked out a laugh. Wow, mood. It was Princess Sherry who was smiling mischievously. Peter looked over at the voice and at the teenager curiously. It's really a problem. You are a child after all, T'Challa said, seemed patronizingly, consoling mostly Steve that it was okay, but Peter did not like that voice off, so he slapped on a sickly sweet smile that screamed, "Try me, bitch." But at the same time, he was so damn innocent. Cherry rolled her eyes and made her way to Peter, Harley following loosely behind her, examining his shirt. He liked NASA. Her eyes lit up, and Peter looked genuinely bashful now. There was an unquestionable light that fled his own, a light that Tony had never seen on Peter's Parker ever. Interesting. But he didn't seem to actually know how to finish or begin, really. Holly did for him. He didn't mention that last time. He said, not unkindly, pointing at the sweatshirt. And Peter looked down and then up again. Oh, the boy, I guess it never came up, Peter said, and Fury rolled his eyes, pushed the kids aside to help their playtime. And Fury went over to Cap and T'Challa to talk to them privately, probably about bonds. Everyone went back to their own conversation. Tony listened to the kids sipping through his coffee as he did. So, are you more of an physics type of guy, or do you like astrophysics? Sherry asked, trying to maintain conversation with a person that apparently was shit at making decent conversation, that despite how much he talked. Peter blinked at the question. I mostly look with Arrow, he said quietly in a stutter, like he didn't know how to respond to the question or how he would respond wrong. He probably didn't know how, considering he dropped out of high school if he wasn't mistaken, but something about his tone was different, shy. It was way different from how he talked to adults. Tony thinks he knows what to say, just not how to say it, which Tony had never known Peter was capable of. Astrophysics is more earthly based, while Astro is space stuff. Peter Harley dumbed down for him based on that previous conversation. He had no choice but to assume Peter knew about science, although he did seem to know about science facts and debate topics. Peter's face seemed to fall a little, like he knew that but didn't have time to say it. Poor kid, he was gonna get roasted. Well, yeah, I use astrophysics when I go. Peter was cut off again. Tony was getting irritated for Peter, because he was obviously piecing something together. Peter, on the hand, seemed to be disappointed rather than mad with disappointment every time he was cut off. It was as if he was finally being allowed to speak and say his opinion, and then the rug would be pulled under him every time. Harley, let him speak! Shirley said, crossing his arms. Harley huffed. Thank you, Shirley. Listen to the spider child. Well, he dropped out of high school. I don't think they offer any kind of advanced classes at public school anyways, Harley said in his defense. And Peter did the freight conversation, just smiled a little. Just a quick clerk of his lips, like he knew someone they didn't, and Shirley made an O with her mouth and furrowed her brows in confusion. Then why is even NASA sweat her shirt? Shirley asked and pointed at the sweatshirt. Harley shrugged, and she looked at Peter for a second, who just kicked an imaginary rock, shoved his hands into his pockets. It was the cheapest thing on the shelf, he muttered, and Tony almost didn't hear him, and oh damn, that's a rowdy waking, and Sherry seemed to sympathize. She put her hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, I didn't even go to elementary school, she said, and Harley snickered, because Sherry was homeschooled, and by that she meant she was little choice of everything. She was a super genius after all, and Peter didn't know that, and that was kind of mean. I mean, I liked chemistry, Peter offered tenuously, sounding like he didn't want to be told disappointment, not after getting what they were being little shits right now. Something dawned on Tony. Had Peter ever had friends before a mutant in hands? Some probably snuck and closed off, knowing how to find piss people off. It didn't seem the type to have. Oh shit. Chemistry? I figured you like gym the most, Parker. Harley snicked, and Sherry right along with him. Peter looked confused, so he shook his head. No, not really. I sucked at gym. I was okay in chemistry. Peter looked a little shocked when Harley and Sherry burst into laughter, and Peter looked at himself and then looked back at them confused, like he didn't know what he did was so funny. Did you get what? A C+? Sherry said, and Peter took all of a second to figure out what was happening. He brushed and ducked his head. Peter couldn't see. No, Tony couldn't see his eyes, but his body position looked utterly devastated. I would. Why was he suddenly? Come on, kids, say something smart, say something funny, jump out a window, do something, say something, anything, just don't stand there. But he did. He stood there and took it. It was worse than when he was taking Roger's demanding lectures or Nat's harsh reprimands. This caught Peter off guard. He didn't know what to do about it, and Tony hated that a lot. Peter, get your ass over here. Thank God for Fury. He was so stupid. He'd been bullied before. He'd been insulted and babied and condoned. He'd been yelled at before. But those would usually alter his face or mask if someone had a problem with him. They didn't usually try to embarrass him before or lead him on. And if they did, he always caught on. Albeit some people used to do that. But recently, nope, everyone just yelled at him. There was no one his age to do that. Not with the parts and people he hanging out with now. They were all grown up, consenting, jerk-ass grown-ups. They were asking questions that you could answer, he liked answering. That you could tell himself about aerodynamics and physics formulas that made him fly above buildings, but only to people who didn't listen, or creatures who didn't understand things that were only ethereal. They were theoretical to everyone else, but he could do them. But he couldn't tell them because he had an identity to keep. Every web that he shot for swing was timed and placed according to precise calculations he did in his head. Eventually they just became a thing he did subconsciously. But he could still tell people the formulas. He kind of thought they were cool. That's why he never got anything less than 100 in physics class. Because if he got anything less than 100 as Spider-Man, he'd die. He let them lead him on and didn't even notice. He didn't come back or a snarky comment to make it at the end. He didn't have the last word to say or something. It was like his mind went blank. What happened? He was doing well. He never let that happen anymore unless he wanted to, and he never wanted to. He was like an undercover shit. It was all about the details, but these kids who were his age showed up. And he started to get nervous. Started to lose his words. He didn't expect to see him here. He had no time to prepare. These kids were a little older than him, but not by much more again that the Avengers were. They liked science and talked about it with passion. He he could hop on that train any day. He was going to, without any second thought, getting desperate. He was about to ruin everything. He should be glad that they don't actually expect him to say anything intelligent. He shouldn't have gone to the press, though, because he let them believe he wasn't book smart. He knew he was smart. It hurt sometimes that he couldn't be himself around people anymore. He should have just made a joke or said something Spider-Man would have been expected to say. Why did he freeze? He must have gotten too excited. He hadn't done that in a while. That wasn't fucking good. Suit up, Fury said, and he went straight to the bathroom to do just that, stopped his racing heart and melting brain. Was this really the way to do this? No, he didn't think that. It was safe for everyone if he just stayed away. He was glad he didn't have to see those two in a while. He felt a ping in his chest, which was stupid because that was just some light joking. It wasn't even bad. They were just having some fun. They didn't know that Peter hadn't anything nice said to him in a while. They didn't know that people never asked questions to him in a form of not yelling. They didn't know that people never asked him about his interests outside of Spider-Man. They didn't know how he missed MJ and Ned so much that sometimes his heart wanted to explode. They didn't know when it fucking hurt. See this right? See this? This right there? This is why he can't have nice things. Not as long as he wears the suit. Not as long as he's Peter Parker or Piotr or whoever he was. He can't just give up the suit because Spider-Man was his constant now. He had nothing else. It was the thing they could never that will never leave him. It can never leave him. Whether he wants it to or not, he was stuck with it. Stuck. There you go, Parker. You good, kid? Tony asked as he was getting on the plane. What was this game? Peter nearly died, especially defenses rebuilt and now stronger than they were when he first walked in. I'm great. It came out wrong, and Peter tucked his head a little and moved forward fast, knowing how Stark's gaze lingered on his back a little. He didn't care. He shouldn't care. Wheels up in 5, Romanoff said as she passed by him, and so she saw his fall out too, because she didn't sound that angry at him. Well, they could have sucked it, because he didn't need sympathy or friends. He gave up that knowing what it meant. He was losing the only people he had in life, the only people who would willingly deal with his BS and everything that came with it. He couldn't let them because they were his friends. Weird how that works. He went to sit on the ground in front of the third chair under the window. It was unspoken by his spot. No one touched it. He was there for a good 10 minutes before they took off. Before Stark came and sat in the plush aisle seat, leaning back casually as if he owned it, and he did. This was, Peter's place. He was giving up the floor, his legs crossed in a cross. Only spared him a glance before sitting back, looking back down, and relocking his web suitors like he had done something wrong, unable to look him in the eyes. What was wrong with him? Did this really bother him that much? He'd been through much worse. He was Spider-Man. He could fight 15 guys all at once, punch robots out the sky. Why was this bothering him? They should have known. Focus on the mission. He wanted the voices to shut up. They weren't helping. He closed his eyes for a second before Stark spoke, silencing them. Teenagers can be mean, he said, and it made Peter uncomfortable. He shifted oddly and still didn't look up. He did stop fiddling with his web shooters. Peter continued. You have friends? He asked, and he was silent until Stark believed he didn't have an answer and moved to leave. He should have let him leave. I used to, he said instead. Steve took it as an invitation to say he probably was. He shifted into a more comfortable position in the seat. Where are they now? He said, a little hesitant to talk. He didn't know why. He never talked about his own personal life. That was probably because it wasn't much of a personal life to talk about, at least not anymore. They aren't dead, but I left them. Peter stuttered out. He really should shut up. This isn't something he wanted anyone, especially Tony Stark, the man who could probably look up his name and instantly find out his friend entered from him, and then he ruined this streak of silence, put them in danger, and why? Peter shifted again. He couldn't find a good position. His skin was too hot. He needed a new he needed cold, new surface, but they kept going. They kept getting warm up by his body heat. They weren't like me. They didn't know about. He gestured upwards and stopped New Year's, referring to his powers and Spider-Man. This job, I don't have the resources to keep them safe, not like you do. Why don't you just ask S.H.I.E.L.D.? They seem to back you no matter what you do, Tony said, crossing his arms and leaning back into a casual position. Peter knew that it was Jabba's obvious irritation to get away with seemingly everything. Peter shook his head. Even if I did, there are some bad guys that don't want money. Tony seemed to understand that immediately. As there was a respectful silence for a while, Peter thought it was the end of conversation. Then Steve Stark said something else. You seem pretty into that conversation, though. You like science. Peter couldn't bring himself to speak. There was a lump in his throat, so he just nodded. Then why didn't he speak up? I guess I just forgot what it felt like. It reminded me of my talks with my friends. I guess Peter shrugged. He couldn't read Tony's look, so he went on. I shouldn't have let it get that far. Peter corrected, and he could feel Stark's gaze on him, pitying. He hated it. Peter, stop. Tony was shocked at his tone. Stop crying. Stop giving me that look. I don't need it in front of the eye. Peter took a breath, calming himself down, because he was probably scaring Tony, and if he's screaming, he knew you'd sound chouse. I would appreciate you letting this go, Miss Stark. My interests and personal connections have nothing to do with what we're doing right now, and I'm not your teammate. No one adventure, so please stay out of it. He warned. He got up and took his bag to move to another aisle. This wasn't safe anymore. Tony looked at him as he passed the second aisle. 8 years earlier, he didn't like going home. It had been 5 months since Peter had first came out of the Special Forces of Wayne and was officially by Wayne's term first summer vacation, though he hadn't understood what he meant at the time. Wayne had dropped him off at the airport in Binging, and he got off at the airport in New York City to be found by a mildly mannered lady named Margaret, who took him in a silver car to a dingy apartment building in a place called Queens, and giving him to May and Ben Parker. He didn't know what to think of it at first. It was very different from the other place he'd been living and people whom he lived with. The first thing he had it going through his head was the apartment smelled really bad. The second thing was that Ben Parker smelled almost as bad as the apartment, if not worse. The third thing was that May Parker wasn't there at all, like she had been drugged. Peter was sure as hell could smell drugs and alcohol from the surrounding apartments. Nonetheless, Margaret wrinkled her nose and told them his name and relevant information as fast as she could for getting out of there, and left as soon as she could. Ben waved him off to go somewhere as May stumbled next to him and was about to fall until she was support. Now that he could see her close up, she looked partially sedated, but not really aware. He wondered what kind of place this would be like, what kind of training he would get here, what kind of missions May and Ben would make him go on. This didn't seem like a meeting the standards for the other places, and was far more unprofessional than being anything official. Why would Covet send him here? May had taken him to his room, which was small and had a bed and a desk, and a closet, and walls were painted forest green instead of grey, and there was clothes that weren't black in his closet, and they didn't seem to have any armor. Was he going undercover? He had said that he was going to start school in a week, and hadn't taken anything in the kitchen if he was hungry before stumbling out to do whatever. Peter shut the door for her and explored the room. There were books on the desk, a schedule that said Queen's Elementary School list, Peter Parker. He'd read the relevant documents, then opened his shitty phone and typed what an elementary school was. That had been their first interaction. Peter had avoided them after that. He wasn't really sure what they were meant to do because they didn't ask him in training to give him an assignment. School did but you didn't have to kill anyone in school. In fact, it was ruled that you weren't allowed to hurt anyone. But after serving a few months of etiquette and interactions they had with him, he finally understood what they were supposed to do. He couldn't help feel a bit sad that they didn't do his jobs properly, that they wouldn't take care of him or watch out for him or harp on him about his grades, even if they were really good anyways. Praise, maybe a little praise wouldn't hurt. He found himself wanting Wade to be there because Wade had taken care of him really well. Even if he was a bit odd, he took better care of him than anyone else he could remember. But he didn't see Wayne until it was summer again, and he didn't think Wayne really knew how to deal with this school nonsense either. But he was okay. Peter kind of liked school. The teachers had yelled at him when he asked questions, and he learned things he already knew. But he was so nice because they let him read lots of books too. After 3 months with May and Ben Parker, is when the insult began. From Ben, anyways. May was heavily sedated or doing work because May was nice and sometimes brought extra fries from the diner she worked at just for Peter. And only Ben was home. It started when he was getting some dinner because no one cooked for him, he had learned. But all he had figured out was with the little money that wasn't spent on drugs, they was only able to afford takeout and cup noodles. Ben was in the kitchen getting a beer from the fridge, and Peter set on ignoring him because he wasn't very nice when he talked to Peter. He took a cup of ramen because that was all the paycheck could afford right now. Ben commentated on the sodium and grumbled really. Peter had perked up a bit because that was a scientific thing, so he started to rant off about the ailment. So to him. But then Ben wrinkled his nose and snapped at him, "Stop being so annoying." He was just telling Peter. They looked like he was getting big, and Peter looked down at himself and blushed. He had been putting on more weight, more consistently. Bigger meals. He hadn't been trained to burn calories as much because of school, which really the only class that burned calories was PE, and it wasn't really even that hard. So Peter put the cup away and didn't eat that night, losing his appetite for the next few days. In fact, MJ practically shoved a handful of fries in his mouth and told him he looked more like a depressed twig than usual. He really had to watch what he ate if Ben started to know he was gaining weight. And if Ben noticed anything at all, then it must have been pretty apparent. How would he have noticed? It would have made going on missions harder if he wasn't fit, and Ben never noticed him, so it must have been a problem, right? It took Peter 2 years to realize it was the stupidest thing he ever done because of Ben. He had done a lot of stupid things because of Ben, but not eating and developing some kind of disability because of it. He got out of that, though, when Ned suddenly voiced his concern, and MJ not so slowly told him he was being an idiot. But by that time, he was more used to not eating than not. But he did get better. That was the stupidest thing he'd ever done for the man, although the food bill was no problem with him. He regretted a lot of the things he'd done. Present. Spidey was a good smasher. He was small, so when Hulk foresaw him, he didn't think he'd be a good smasher, but Spidey was strong in this puny body to Hulk absolute delight. When he first met Hulk, he was red, and the bad guys were grey. Were grey. So he realized that Spidey was fun, and if he was wearing grey, like he did that one time, Peter would have smashed him. Hulk would have smashed him, but he didn't, because he knew Spidey was a friend. Spidey was starting to fight with them more. Every time Spidey wasn't there, Hulk got sad. No one likes fighting with Hulk except for Spidey. They all stayed away because when he smashes things go boom, and he likes his friends when they make things go boom, but he doesn't like it when they go boom too. But this smashing was more orderly. Or at least that's the term S.H.I.E.L.D. used. He also said that Hulk smashing was too dangerous for others to be around, except for the bad guys, because it was good when the bad guys were hurt, but not other things. But Spidey didn't have to get worried about going boom. He was always moved that way before they did. And Hulk didn't know how he did it, but it did make him say I needed Hulk during battle. Spidey knew when things were going to go boom before they went boom. Hulk could only understand that much. But no one else did, because they yelled at him when he got too close to something dangerous. Spidey had metal things in the ears that let him hear the adventures even when he couldn't see them. Everyone had one, except Hulk. Hulk would actually smash the metal thing if he had one. It still made him sad they couldn't talk to anyone like they did to each other, but sometimes Spidey would push a button and he couldn't hear them anymore. He would make a receive sound and start talking to Hulk instead, which made Hulk happy, and Spidey seemed to like talking to Hulk more than others, because even if Hulk liked his friends, they always yelled at Spidey, even though Spidey was Hulk's friends too. Hulk didn't understand why he did that, but he did like Spidey talk, because Hulk did talk a lot, and Spidey talked a lot. He was funny and made fun of the bad guys and not Hulk. They had lots of fun together. They played smashing games together. It was fun. He liked when Spidey laughed and he was happy because the Hulk was making Spidey happy. He never made anyone happy or laugh or smile, even if Spidey didn't have a mouth to smile with. Hulk liked Spidey because Spidey was afraid of him. Sometimes Hulk always noticed. Spidey wouldn't talk. He would turn his mouth thing off before he'd smash even began. He would stand close to the Hulk and they would do serious smashing. That smashing was no games or fun or talking, but Hulk could tell that Spidey wasn't talking because of not Hulk problems. Hulk didn't like when Spidey went quiet. It meant he was sad. When Spidey went quiet, it meant they had lots to say, but he didn't know how to say it. He couldn't read minds like the Red Gull did. Hulk didn't know how to make Spidey better and not sad no more. So Hulk helped Spidey smash and didn't say anything. Smash reporting, which made Spidey a little happier. Although today Spidey was really sad. It was kind of sad that Hulk felt before he met him, or when Spidey wasn't on a mission with him. Hulk really didn't like this kind of sad. It was a lonely sad. Why Spidey sad, he asked. Because he shouldn't feel lonely. He had Hulk, and Hulk was his friend, and he thought Spidey knew that. And Spidey looked up at him confused. Spidey always listened to Hulk because Hulk never spoke much, but even if Hulk did talk a lot like Spidey, he knew that Spidey would listen to him. He was very good at listening to things too, at hearing things too. Oh, it's nothing, Big Green. Ready to smash? What kind of question was that? Hulk was always ready to smash, but Spidey was sad now. Even if Spidey pretended not to be sad, Spidey was walking away, and Hulk picked him up by his collar, like the little kittens Spidey handed him once. And Hulk was absolutely terrified to smash him because they were so tiny. Spidey said, "No." Hulk insisted, and Spidey just went floppy in his hand. He was skinny, he was scrawny and puke. He weighed nothing to Hulk. Spidey needs to eat more. I don't know. Spidey moved his shoulder up once, and Hulk knew why Spidey was sad. Spidey was smart, so Spidey should know why he's sad too. Spidey does not need to be sad, because Hulk is Spidey's friend, Hulk said. Maybe he didn't need to read minds like Red Gull. Spidey knew, but Spidey didn't answer for a while. Hulk thought he might have been wrong, but then Spidey looked at him, and Hulk could not see Spidey's mouth because he does not have one, but he knew he made him happy. Good. Spidey deserves to be happy. Thanks, Big Green, said in a sincere way. And raised smash. Hulk smiled at him with his smashing grin. This is why Hulk likes Spidey. Harley was a good kid. Tony had known him since he was 11, and he'd always been one to pick on. Never one to bully, even if he was a little shit sometimes. But that was just endearing as it was irritating. Harley was smart, observant, and kid. And he was spending 2 years in that her alone. That was before Tony had taken him in when he was 14, because his mom had expressly left him, even if she wasn't there for much from the beginning. Harley was a good, smart kid who helped Tony in his time of need by taking the hero in, and Tony was a trained favorite. Parker was independent and smart enough to be considered not stupid, even if he was supposedly dropped out of school for his vigilante thing. Peter could fend for himself and deal with the problems his own way, emotional or otherwise, in the way it was always been since Tony had first met him. As Tony had known, Parker had to ask for help, and it really could in favor if he had any. He didn't make deals or with the exception of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was more like a deal and more like exchanging favors. And if it was so, then Parker had a lot more headway than Fury. Headway with Fury. Maybe that's why he got away with everything he wants. Nor did he make promises. Parker always dealt with things alone. That was another thing that Tony felt was so wrong stepping into this. If he had chosen between Harley and Parker, it would be Harley in an instant. No questions asked. He was his kid. He could deal with his endearing bullshit on a daily basis, but Parker was nothing but a pain in his ass since he first met the kid, always disobeying and acting out. Parker had this coming for him for a while. It should be good thing if he was knocked down a peg or two, theoretically at least. So this conversation he was about to have felt wrong in all of Tony's beliefs and many other levels. Like he was betraying Harley by accusing him or more like pointing out of bullying Parker. Tony had a sinking feeling as he walked in the briefing room to Harley's current location. Time seemed not to be able to go any slower, and impending something coming closer and closer. Anticipated dread, he wasn't sure. Harley was in a lab with Shuri, working on a holocene. They probably building more prototypes for an Avenger gear. Tony had long since allowed Harley to help, especially when Harley threatened to build an Iron Man suit and poor Peter Parker become Iron Lad or something. When Tony accepted after almost having a heart attack to say that he could help the Avengers by building some shit, not a personal suit. Needless to say, Harley had jumped in like a flea on a dog. And was that how the expression went? Shirley did the same thing for most of the Wakanda and Black Panther tech. So when they were together, they mostly bounced ideas and built things in the nearest slabs while sharing some inside jokes called vines. Though Tony thinks it's Gen Z thing, considering he heard Parker quote the exact same phrases during a fight or debriefing. Ugh, trends. That's what they were doing when Tony and T'Challa came in. Hey, how was it? Harley asked, not looking up from the circuit board he was soldering. Shirley didn't even bother to turn from her analytic trials. They didn't see T'Challa and Tony glance at each other, uncertainty flashing across the king's expression. He was probably in the same predicament as he was with Shirley. Kids, right? Shirley, could you come with me for a moment? T'Challa wasn't asking, showing he had more experience in dealing with these kind of things. Lucky bastard. Tony was more out of his element. Shirley groaned as she closed the stats she was toying with and dragged herself out of the room to walk behind the king, not even waiting goodbye, because she was probably going to be back within 30 minutes. Holly looked up at Tony and noticed there was something off in his posture, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Holly raised a brow because this was unusual to just come in and stop her, Shirley and him working on respective projects, so something must have happened. What's up? Holly asked, crooking his head and throwing his eyebrows confused. Tony breathed in, setting himself for a conversation to start. Not having much of a seedway into the conversation because it was so absurd. I'm sure he didn't mean to, but he meant to do it, but probably not that kind of reaction, Tony muttered to himself, then turned to him. You're a good kid, he finished with firm belief. Holly furrowed his eyebrows, a bit more worried. What's wrong? Did something happen on the mission? Holly tilted his head. Things often went wrong on missions, causing Tony to have various reactions to them. Some of those reactions were self-destructive, and Holly, Pepper, or Rhodey, or Bruce would have to drag him out of it. Some of the reactions had been building non-stop. Some of the reactions had made him clingy and needy, as Pepper put it. This was the first time he was trying a new method, though. No, well, yes, we went wrong, but more like before the mission, Tony said, and looked off to the side for a moment before looking Harley in the eyes again as he continued. It wasn't really, well, it was more weird than anything. putting off would be better words. Would you stop dancing around it? What's wrong? Harley said, a bit annoyed at Tony's constant stuttering. If he had something to say, he should just say it. He never usually tried to find out the right words to put in sentences. He always just winged it, especially if Harley didn't need to hold back. It was a bit irritating. He was doing it now. Harley crossed his hands over his chest, waiting for Tony to say what he needed. Remember when you and Shirley had a little heart-to-heart with Parker? Tony asked, a bit rushed, and Harley looked unimpressed. He nodded in a, yeah, what kind of way? Yeah, you heard that? Harley tilted his head, not ashamed, more like confused and inquisitive, as if he didn't understand why Tony was seemingly bringing a random event, which made it even more awkward for what Tony was about to point out. No cues. Harley didn't know he did anything wrong. Yeah, Tony said, a bit worriedly, making Harley's face contort in concern and so confusing. It was a bit harsh, don't you think? Tony cut in straight through the case. Harley blinked said for a moment before scoffing musing. I mean, yeah, but he puts way more salt every day. Plus, we didn't even mean it. Harley said, fearing his brow like this was a stupid thing to talk about. It kind of was, now that Tony was thinking about the conversation and not Parker's reaction on the plane. It was just some fun. If you had a problem, you should have told us. We would have stopped. He could have told us too. I mean, he isn't a little kid. If you wanted something, you should have just asked. And Tony decided that was a good point. Parker is independent. He didn't need someone holding his hand, especially in business. He didn't know that. Tony grumbled, attempted to defend himself in his reasoning of talking to Harley. Something when Harley made a very good point like this. Tony wanted who was the adult and who was the unreasonable teenager, but Tony was right in this one, even if it was a bit hard to read on. So, I mean, he knew that, but I think it still affected him, Tony clarified, and Harley's mouth made an O in understanding. Did we understand feelings? Harley asked, more amused than anything, and yeah, Tony got those amusing thought, but actually seeing it up close was not a ballpark. It was always scary. Parker showing emotion somehow made him seem younger than he had. Like he actually had a soul that didn't just thrive on pissing people off, but approval and acceptance of his peers. Tony might not be a mutant, but he knew there was a big deal for one to be accepted by colleagues because of how rarely it occurred. I think you did, and as entertaining as it sounds, I witnessed Spidey having a general emotion, Tony said a bit dramatically, but it was really a sight to see, especially from a seemingly rebellious and snarky teenager that didn't really care about what people thought about him. And it was fucking scary. Like, he actually felt something. Never want to see that again, kid, Tony warned. And Harley looked up like he didn't know what to think. Was it that bad? Harley asked a little more quietly. And Tony seemed scared, and that made Harley turn a bit more frightened as well. I don't know. Yeah, it caught me by surprise. It's all. It just seemed a bit broad, especially to literally anyone else. It could have been, wouldn't have been, but that kid's just. Tony stopped to think and rephrased his answer. He didn't further Parker's embarrassment more. He just needs someone in his corner, you know, not to try to use him or fight him. You guys seem to be the first person to act more like a friend than the whole thing, and then it was just a joke. That seems messed up, don't you think? I didn't. Harley paled. Tony held up his hand. He wouldn't let his kid feel bad over this because Harley literally had no way of knowing. He just had to be more careful next time. You didn't know anything. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to punish you for that. Just like next time maybe, Tony said kindly and smiled at him. Harley still looked distraught, as if that wasn't an answer he was looking for. If he wanted to make this right, and Tony couldn't be more proud of him. He was a good kid and apologized for no. He doesn't seem like the type to bring up the past he advised helpfully. Harley looked a little grateful for it, but more rarely and guilty. If there will be a next time, Harley muttered. Still feeling awful. Mostly awful. I didn't mean to. He looked to the side of the floor, and Tony stood up and came over and put a hand on his shoulder. Spidey is no dumbass. He's smart, like ridiculously smart, but not like the rest of us, Tony said as he pulled the kid into a hug. He uses aerophysics, but I think he prefers astrophysics. Harley laughed at that, and it made Tony smile more. Really? Yes. a bit incredulous. Nobody seems like the kind of guy to like Astro. Tony smiled at his kid, who laughed again. Maybe I'll try and teach him something. God, he loved his kid. He smiled down at him, and Harley pulled a bit away to look at the mechanic. I think he liked that. The kid was drinking fucking HIC when the Avengers walked in the conference room. They expected Fury to be there for a mission. Usually if there was a toss-up whether the kid would come or not, but it looked like he was coming this time. Sometimes the kid would come on a mission that didn't require the whole team. That was not likely to happen, though it still wasn't completely out of ordinary. The kind of thing that was different in that Fury wasn't in room for briefing. It was rare for the kid to be anywhere that a mission without Fury, at least as far as the Avengers knew. So he does go off on his own a lot, actually. This mission only required Steve, Sam, and Clint. Usually if they had mission info and no briefing, it was a big deal. The kid never went on those missions. He only went on really serious and important missions as a kind of backup. So what was he doing here now? They can only assume that it included the kid too. He was sitting at the table, juice box in his mouth, the label popping lemon, and although it was the superior flavor, it had a high calorie count. Clint stared at the information, stored the information away just in case. He looked very determined and finished it. Not feeling for his out-of-beat phone, which he was doing. He was in a hoodie and in his Spider-Man suit acted as pants. He was wearing his beat-up Converse. A beat up backpack next to him on the table, and he wasn't paying attention to them as they walked in. Clint walked over and knocked it up with his hand before the kid could flip backwards to avoid it, straw never leaving his mouth. But the corner of his lips crooked upwards. It was infuriating how he did that. Sam snorted as the kid's antics and snapped. Do you want some cookies with that? The kid did that. As he looked at Sam, his small figure bouncing aside. You got some? I'm starving, he said, eyes shimmering, releasing his off his mouth. Sam looked conflicted. Clinton laughed at his friend's failed works. What? No, I was making fun of you, Sam said, and the kid pouted, seemingly disappointed in the fact they didn't cookies that was offered. At the expense of getting my hopes up? When I'm hungry, that's just cruel, man. He said, shaking his head in disapproval. Sam squawked in response as Cap took up the mat, toward lecturing the child, as he so often did. If you're hungry, you should have eaten a proper meal, Steve said in his chastising tone that he mostly talked to the kid with. It was rare they talked in any other voice with Parker. Like a nice whole meal they spent out cooking and sat down at your dinner table. Peter droned on with an unpressed look. It took Clint a second to process the question, and Ned a second to see that Peter had this look behind his eyes, like a longing look. It was covered and unnoticeable if you weren't looking for it. Captain looked a little inflected for a second, probably at a strange question. But yeah, ideally, he said in a confusing manner. Peter gave him a smile that shouldn't be on his young face, nor should be directed at someone older than him, like a smile parents give their children when they say something cute but unrealistic, like unicorns. Even though Thor had insisted Pegasus did exist in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy, things that would never happen. I'll remember that next time he said back in a more calm tone. He was trying to be gentle now, treading lightly over this topic. He didn't just want to hide from whatever he was implying, which Clint, for the life of him, couldn't figure out. This kid was trying to shelter him from something. He didn't want to break some kind of unspoken belief. Okay, where's Fury? Clint said, getting a headache from trying to figure the kid. He wasn't even sure he wanted to figure out. He just wanted to avoid the kid's eye contact and ignore the feeling that he was a kid by looking around. Oh, he had to leave, but he told me to brief you on your mission, Peter said, as if he was just remembering. He put down the box and picked up a sheet folder from his hands, which looked it made him look more like a little kid than a teenager, and stood up at a table to jump down from in front of Cap. Clint raised an eyebrow. You're not coming, he asked, his raised eyebrows. The spider kid tapped away at something to pull up a mission. He shook his head. Oh no, he gave me something else to do. He asked me to just tell you about your mission before I leave. Peter smiled, having found what he was looking for. "You're gonna raid," and he made a delighted noise. "You're gonna raid a Hydra base. It's in Philly on the North Pole. The direct coordinates are on the Crinton jet." He phoned slightly at the quick, fast pace before anyone could inject. "Is that all?" Steve said professionally, steering himself away and standing straighter. "Is that all?" Steve asked professionally, steering himself and standing straighter. Peter didn't mimic him as he doubled back for the tablet. Double back to the table for his juice box. Peter sipped his juice box as he shook his head and handed Steve the tablet with his other hand. "Well, that's what the file says at least, but what Fury really wants you to do is to take it out, but off the books. You gotta get some information on the surface," Peter said with a casual tone. "Crinton's gotta say, it's nice knowing what the real mission was, not sugarcoating it with big words that justify stealing." It was unprofessional but relieving. "What's the information?" Steve asked as Peter poked his straw around, not looking very interested. Clinton noticed that the action was the kind his kids did when they were angering for juice that was stuck in the corners. It made his lips crook up a little. "Just some dirt about a shield that they have. It's always that, but they didn't send a regular agents for, because this is on the Avengers," Peter said, and looked up at them all confused. Steve looked a little alarmed, like he should be, because this was alarming. "They didn't tell you the information you're stealing?" Clint grumbled that they weren't stealing, and Sam said this would be the first time she'll ever told us anything. Peter scoffed at that. How did they get stuff on the Avengers?" Clint asked. Peter crooked his head. Now that was a look of pure confusion, totally taking over everything. "Hydra infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., he said, and it made them all double take at the kid. "I mean, it was before I came. That was partially Lee's on here. Not that they would tell me that." He grumbled the last part and looked up at Steve. "They didn't tell you. I figured being Avengers you'd know." Peter shrugged. They all stared at him with slightly open mouths. "How do you know?" Steve demanded, and Peter sipped his juice box, unbothered by the tone, and shrugged. "If he doesn't want me to know something, I'll find out. It's my thing." And he stopped trying. Eventually accepted his fate, Peter said, and then had a thinking look on his face. "Maybe I shouldn't have told you that, but in my opinion, I don't do anything unless I know why I'm doing it. So if I'm gonna brief you, I'm gonna give you the real mission, not the half-ass summarization. Unless you want one, but I ain't got one for you." He shrugged and continued on with his shoe box, which he somehow was not done with yet. "Any other questions?" he said with the straw in his teeth. They didn't answer and he walked out the window. The kid was fucking terrifying. Parker was a pain in the ass. Not to Harley Keener in any direct way. He was a pain in the ass to the Avengers, therefore being constantly whined and complained about in the tower. He had heard these complaints and hours about the kid, even though they were probably the same age, given the Avengers. Irritating, disrespectful, annoying, arrogant brat, and other nasty things are thrown around. Even before meeting him, Harley thought he'd be a spoiled, arrogant, spoiled brat that thought he was better than everyone. Kind of like Flash. He thought Parker would brag about his superhero and all that shit, showing off his powers. The Avengers might have misled him a little, because when he actually did meet Peter Parker, he was nothing that Harley could ever imagine. He had this almost shy vibe to him. He didn't talk much, but that wasn't he didn't want to. Because he thought he was better than everyone else. It was because he was tired, and only probably if he was pushing his stomach against the counter as anything go by. Not Tasha taught him to look for little things. Goodbye, keep his head up, and Harley was confused on how this kid could make the Avengers so irritated. And then the weirdest irrigation he made the weirdest, almost accusing, controversial setup Harley had ever heard of. And when Harley got mad, Parker handled it like a champ, debated and reasoned, not unlike MJ does when she brought up controversial topics. God would they ever meet. Peter might actually be a superhero, but I didn't think so. No matter how much people labeled him, he just didn't care about labels or people's opinions of him in general. He didn't seem very self-conscious, so Ollie figured he could take a little bashing. If he from a loop when he figured out that Peter could in fact get offended, and Holly was well aware of how many Spider-Man could make his life hell. Unpredictable superhero from the ghetto was not something Harley wanted to mess with. He really felt bad. Parker could take a million thoughts from people with no hindrance. So when he said something to make Parker feel bad, must have been really terrible. Apparently, though, it wasn't something he said more than they did. Hey, Parker snapped his head up and grabbed the paper from the paper he was holding. He was currently stationed against the wall outside the conference room where the team was going over a few more mission things. Apparently, Parker was kicked out or introduced or something because he didn't seem to be doing anything important. But you shouldn't assume that because, being, again, unpredictable superhero from the ghetto, his backpack was next to him and he put it on an oversized hoodie, the NASA one. Harley looked to the space next to him and Parker slowly moved his bag. Complying for the unasked request to sit down, neither broke his wide-eyed, confused eye contact. That was something weird, something interesting, innocently curious but cautious about the look. It made him look years younger than he did. Tony said that happened sometimes. Harley sat in the seat easily and looked at the paper, not trying to read it, but did draw attention to it. He knew better than to read something about superheroes, hence the title was holding. It could be dangerous, classified, and get him in trouble. He couldn't defend himself like the Avengers could. Hell, he couldn't defend himself like Peter could. And they were the same age, a bit. He was probably trained, but Harley didn't know by who. He was also a mutant enhanced. He didn't know what Peter was. Either way, he was all human, which made him dangerous, which meant that he knew how to protect himself even if he wasn't formally trained. Harley had read somewhere that mutants have animalistic survival instincts that kick in when they feel threatened, although he wasn't sure that it was true for all mutants. Is that classified? He asked, looking at Peter as Peter quickly looked down at it, snapping back to his face. He shook his head, not entirely looking it in the eye. So, sort of? Peter started looking at the paper, but not hiding it. He was never wearing it solo up. That got Harley's attention solo up. He thought Spider-Man was just an asset for some Avenger missions. When he wasn't doing that, he considered doing vigilante work that no one bothered to stop anymore. If he was getting his own solo missions, he must be an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was news because Harley thought he was just a vigilante. You're an agent? Harley said, sounding surprised. Peter shook his head frantically and half a laugh, as if I don't actually qualify for level 0. They just qualify for level 0. They just give me stuff to do. Plus, Fury needs to keep an eye on me. I don't really mind as long as he doesn't out me, Peter said casually, but Harley could detect a hint of cautiousness. Parker was good at covering it up, but he was watching his words, and if Harley didn't live in the Avengers, including 2 super spies and assassin, he wouldn't have picked it up. It was more to the story. Harley didn't press though. He was here to apologize, not interrogate, although Parker would probably get more information off of interrogating skills alone. Natasha said people do that, and it's a tactic she often used when being interrogated. What's the mission? Harley asked, and Peter paused as if considering answering him honestly. Harley was sure that Peter could be lying and he wouldn't know unless he wanted Harley to. Natasha did that sometimes to teach him how to figure out if people were lying, and hence profiling. Just got to get some basic information about this one guy in Queens. It's boring as fuck, but it's not like I got anything better to do, Peter said with a shrug. He was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. Harley wasn't really sure, but he knew he wasn't telling him something. No way Spider-Man would do something that he thought was boring. That just wasn't his thing. He heard Fury complain on multiple occasions that Spidey turned him down because he had something better to do or just didn't want to do it. He didn't exactly know how Peter and Fury's relationship worked, but he did know that if one of the Avengers did half the shit Parker pulled, they'd be in deep fucking trouble. How did Spidey get Fury to let him get away with so much shit? It kind of pissed him off because Tony would come to the lab bone tired and get called on a mission, or even 5 minutes later he couldn't take a break. What made Spider-Man so special that he could duck out anytime he wanted? Maybe because he was a kid, but that didn't seem very significant when the world was in danger. So who's assigned with the mission to you, Fury? Harley asked conversationally. He was sure Parker knew what he was doing either, but he didn't even care or just play it long. Fury, but it's not for him, Peter informed as he flicked through the pages again, but not because he was reading it. He just seemed restless. Who's it for? Harley asked, and Peter gave him a snarky grin, the grin he was so often accumulated with, the grin that fooled him into thinking that Peter wasn't insecure in the light of the truth. It looked more like a defense mechanism than a personality quirk to Harley now. That's what I can't tell you, he said cruelly, not very apologetically. He knew that Harley understood that he couldn't know for his own safety, and if he was being honest, he was glad Parker didn't hate him enough to put him in danger when his demeanor changed. It was sudden and like a whiplash and caught Harley off guard a little. Why are you so interested in it? Harley sighed at Peter's curious tone with a note of hint of suspicion when he looked at the paper and added then a hint of sadness in it, which really caught Harley off guard. Did Mrs. Stark put you up to this? He asked. Then there was a beat of silence. When Harley opened his mouth to answer, Peter did it for him. He asked you to apologize, didn't he? It wasn't a question, see? This was what Harley meant when he said Parker would be getting more information than he would be dishing. How was that even a motive that? He was at least a few months younger than no. Harley didn't know what to say, so he said, yeah, it was almost untrue. Peter didn't analyze it for lies, but he also found something else. How did he do that? You feel bad, don't you? It was just some fun. Plus, I got over daily. He said to look up. That was exactly his logic. So, Dish, Parker, why did you have to have a mini panic attack in front of Iron Man? It was all ears. I get it. I could tell Mr. Stark was very freaking out when he talked to me, if I'm being honest. I was kind of freaking out, too. I don't like when things get to me. It's stupid and annoying. It sounded like it was poor mom to have emotions. Like it wasn't okay to be sad. At least around other people. Had you ever sought out comfort before? That was kind of impression. Did it get to you? Make you, feel something? Harley wasn't sure what he was trying to say. What would it make Peter feel? He was pretty pissed and sad, especially if he didn't have friends and then that got thrown in his face. How do you say sorry to that? Because no matter how much he apologized, he wasn't actually fixing anything. He was lucky he did have friends, and sometimes he took that fact for granted. He had amazing smart friends and a supportive kick-ass family, but what did Peter have? No friends and a freak accent that made him outside from everyone else. Maybe that's what made him special, because he could not get angry when people dumped this shit on him and took for granted things he didn't and probably would never have. Like a normal life with normal problems. Harley didn't know much about enchanted people, but he did know that when you get enchanted, so do your problems. At least that's the simplest way to put it. I guess it was just unexpected, Peter said, looking at the wall now with dullness in his tone. I guess it caught everyone off guard, huh? He turned back to Harley with a smile. It looked real, but it was fake. It was hiding something. Just how sad and upset this conversation was really messed up. The situation really was. But Harley couldn't help but notice that Peter wasn't asking for friendship. He already given forgiveness, but without much of a thought. Did he even want friends? This kind of stuff seems easier when you had it. I'm so sorry, Harley admitted. Peter waved gently, indicating that it doesn't matter anymore and that it's in the past. But this did matter. No matter how much Harley thought about it, it was a fucking problem. No harm, no foul, Peter said easily. But was that true? Was he just hiding the harm Harley caused him? Because he definitely cared more than he showed. We don't really have a good first impression, so third time a charm, I guess. He sighed and turned over to Harley and shook out his hand. Now, Harley didn't know what he was doing. He was pretty lost. I'm Peter Parker, he said with ease. With an easy, welcoming smile. Harley took his hand awkwardly and shook it. Harley Keener. Peter laughed, and Harley didn't see it as particularly funny, but found himself laughing too. God, this is corny. He couldn't help but point out between bits of giggles. I'm not saying that first time was particularly perfect, but it's better than the first time, Peter said with a smile in his voice. It was friendly and warm, and Harley thinks that for the first time he actually seen Peter smile. Yeah, definitely, Harley said happily. He wasn't completely sure what just happened, but he thinks he just made friends with Spider-Man, or maybe he just made friends with Peter Parker. Harley couldn't find himself to think of this friendship with Spider-Man more than his less infamous alter ego. He kind of liked the thought of being friends with Parker. Behind all that talk was a pretty chill dude. Who would have guessed? So Peter looked up to the side after laughter died down and comfortable, if not a little awkward, silence fell between them. What now? Tony told me you were smart, Harley Brett said, cause he had nothing else to say. He blushed a little at the outburst, and Peter just looked amused. How'd you get that conclusion? He asked in a teasing tone. Harley shrugged, not trying to look casual, because he was probably trying to look casual, but probably failing under Parker's vigilance. If it did, he didn't say anything. Don't know, but he said it, and he doesn't say it often. So Harley trailed off and looked at Peter, who now had an amused smirk on his face. It has to be true, he fished for him, and Harley nodded in confirmation. Tony didn't say that people were smart often, and when he did, it was usually the idea or opinion, not the person itself. When he said the person was smart, that meant that they were fucking smart. He didn't throw that comment around lightly. So when Tony said that Peter was smart, he took it like an unchangeable fact. Is it? Harley asked, as if his opinion on the matter couldn't be wavered. Natasha said that in answer, even if it really didn't have no choice in the matter, could tell you a lot about a person. In this case, Peter's humility and ego that was being tested. Peter looked thoughtful before answering, looking up briefly. I guess. I grew up in a place where book smarts didn't matter. Street smarts would help you survive, Peter said, and then shrugged. It was a toss-up whether I'd even have enough money for a graduation gown, Peter said, and then grimaced. Turns out I didn't need one. That was more than an answer he needed, or probably did, because it seemed that Peter did want to graduate high school at least, but something got in the way. something that wasn't Spider-Man related that changed the story that Harley had fabricated a lot. It also felt like he was still missing something. What happened? You didn't seem the guy to flunk out, like a super guy to flunk out of high school. Harley said, honestly, it was true. When I first saw Peter, he didn't seem like he had skipped or anything. He seemed almost intelligent, but then Harley jumped to conclusions about dropping out of high school for Spider-Man at first, but not really insulted. It justified his anger if someone who's insulting them was wrong in their logic. Life, Aunt wasn't paying the rent because she's getting high more often after my uncle died. Even if he was around, he was too drunk to support us any longer. Peter said. Holly couldn't pick the tone, but geez, that fucking sucked. Aunt getting high and drunk uncle went hand in hand with abuse. But if Holly learned anything, he knew not to assume, but still, as messed up as it was, it would make more sense if Peter had been abused. How else would he be able to casually take horrible things on stride? That part didn't need to be said out loud, though. Harley was like 70% sure of it. Again, he couldn't really assume anything about Parker. Jeez, sorry, man. Harley said. There seemed nothing else to say. Peter rendering him silence much more than he thought this conversation he would in this conversation. Somehow he wasn't surprised, so it was messed up and totally horrific, but somehow it was more than he expected. It made sense. The thing is, he could totally see Peter getting abused and picked on. He was more unassuming, or at least he looked that way. Holly wasn't so sure he was an athletic type before he got power. He took the bullying as Spider-Man with little thought. Like, he didn't even think that it would affect him. He didn't chip away at him. But one well-placed commenter could tear him apart. That kind of attitude came from experience that no one else accepted him, and since that probably no one else that, and he probably just accepted that no one would ever accept all of him. It was messed up, and Harley hated that he couldn't see it before or do anything about it before. He was also kind of mad at the Avengers for not doing anything about it, but Peter didn't seem like the type to accept help easily. Again, he would be fucked over too many times to not be suspicious of someone being nice to him. It's whatever. Peter shrugged. He looked like he didn't bother him, which was kind of weird because that kind of shit fucked kids up. Holly didn't want to believe that Peter had been worse, so he didn't. Not until Holly said, "Doesn't really matter anymore, they're dead. I can't keep up record if I'm not going to go in CPS, so either graduate or drop out." Peter said. That explained it. It was a good fucking reason not to go to school. No one wanted to go in the system, especially if you had other options, which Peter did have as Spider-Man. Tony said the reason he dropped out was probably because he wanted to be Spider-Man, then went to reprimand the kid because he shouldn't be focused on dying, just school, get a life and all that shit. But Peter's real life was absolute shit, and that was putting it lightly. Fucked up would be a better term, and he would never have a chance of killing it because it was just a foundation of his life. No wonder he wanted to escape in a world of superheroes and villains with his enhanced abilities. It would only get worse for him when he came from, with him being a freak and an outcast and an orphan with no one to go back to when there was really nowhere for him to go because being someone you're not was easier to do than to face your shitty reality. Harley wouldn't want to face it either. Peter thought he was going to end up being a blue collar job then and that would be it for him. At least he wanted to help people by being Spider-Man. It made sense. Why didn't you go into the system? Now that he had said out loud, it sounded like a stupid question. Of course he didn't want to go into the system, especially to finish something as useless to Peter Parker as at least at school. Who would want to put themselves through hell they couldn't escape? Because once you were in it, there was no getting out. There was no do-overs, no second chances, no dropping out. You went in until you were 18, and 3 years, and it seemed like much, but it was really an eternity. And an amused look he got had him holding his hands in surrender, and Peter rolled his eyes and made an almost good-natured way. Peter talked away, even if that question didn't need to be answered. My life is fucking shit. Was fucked as soon as I was 6. Actually, scratch that. It was fucked when I was 3. No way. I'll get anywhere worth to go. No way. I would get anywhere worth getting to before. And then this shit happens. He adjusted himself and hardly knew he meant his powers. Then some other things. Then I had to fix some of my own shit before I messed up. And then I was like, well, it doesn't matter anymore. If I'm gonna die, then why not just help some people before I get there? And then more shit. And then this shit. Peter adjusted around him, making wise swooping to emphasize how much he couldn't get out of it. It was almost as if he had a choice in being Spider-Man. And now I'm here. Peter put his elbows on his knees and looked at Harley. Neutral look, waiting for an answer of some sort. He was way too casual with this sort of conversation, being too laid back about this topic. But as Harley said, Parker was a chill dude, like really chill apparently. That's a lot of shit, Harley said, acknowledging. It was almost as if he would be acknowledged something a kid would say. You do have a lot of it. Peter shrugged. Most of it. Peter said in a so-and-so motion. Anything they can help you with? Harley was gesturing to the door of the Avengers, with the door of the Avenger behind. Peter snorted immediately. Harley, no offense, but one of the reasons Harley brought me to this fuckery in the first place was because I would help deal with some of their problems. Trust me, I don't need to add mine on top of it, Peter said, and Harley felt him choke up for a second. The fuck? Does that mean the Avengers don't know about Peter's real life? They don't know why he dropped out. They don't know how he was supporting himself, barely getting by because he was a kid, didn't want to raise suspicions, and also because he was fucking Spider-Man. The kind of shit he was doing required a shit ton of therapy, like noon to 5, 3 days a week in a therapy center kind of therapy, in a trauma center kind of therapy at least. Oh, anything I can help with? Harley said, what of courtesy. He knew he was helping. He knew he could help with none of anything Peter was dealing with. Peter, bless his soul, looked at him thankful but unrealistic away for a second. Probably he shrugged. Harley, not expecting an answer, felt a battle of hope in his chest. But I'm not letting you anywhere near it. Harley groaned. The bubble officially popped. Peter laughed at that. And how could he laugh and smile when his life was utter crap? Come on, Parker, he whined, and Peter is amused at Harley's reaction. Why not? Even though he knew why. Because Storm would kill me. 2, the adventures would bring me back to me again. Which, if I died, I would not want to be brought back to life. Just let me fucking die. And lastly, my shit. It's not like the adventure. It's dangerous. It's not sponsored or supporting the doctors, no allies. I don't drag civilians in under any circumstances of any kind. It's not alien invasions. Most of the time the media, much less the government, doesn't even know about it. Harley ranted off, and then said more seriously and quietly, not looking at Harley and I, but in the wall in front of him, in this messed up Harley. It gets really messed up. It gets really messy, and it's so wrong, and it's not even funny, and I can't find a way to joke about these things. And normal civilians aren't dragged in unless they aren't normal, as they thought they were. So unless you get dragged in, no, you can't help. He wasn't sure if you were supposed to hear the quiet remarks. I hope you're never able to help me, Peter said under his breath. But he did. Peter cared a lot about him. Wow. Is it worse than the Hydra? Harley asked, almost breathless, not believing Peter, but not entirely not believing him either. Peter huffed out an incredulous laugh, as if he couldn't believe himself, but what he said was probably true. There's a lot of messed up shit in this world Harley didn't know about that Peter did. The papers in his hands were probably one of them. You don't want to know. This is the kind of shit the government covers up when they finally find the bodies. It's messed up, Peter said quietly, as if talking about a sin. Then there was a pause, and he clapped him on the back with an put-off smile. Hey, it's gonna be okay, he said happily, and Harley looked at his smile in disbelief. How can anything be okay? How could he say that when his life was so messed up? When he knew just how much the world was messed up, how could he smile and not pretend that everything in his life wasn't actually trying to kill him? How can he still want to help people when they would only betray, use, and belittle him? He has the entire world set against him, and he's telling Harley about some bullshit about everything. And he's telling Harley some bullshit about everything being okay? Hell no. How was any of the shit you just told me remotely near okay? Harley asked, with his brow furrowing. Peter sighed, like he really wanted to end it here, but Harley wouldn't let that happen. Not until he understood why Peter pretended his life wasn't going straight to hell. It's okay, because despite all the shit that happened and the shit that will eventually happen, I don't regret having my kind of childhood, Peter said quietly with a sad smile on his face. He didn't look Harley in the eyes, stared at the ground in front of him as he let his hand drop from Harley's shoulder. What kind of childhood was over before it even began? Harley said in a dead tone, and Peter huffed a humorless laugh. Yeah, but I understand things better than I ever could with a normal one. I know where the drug circles are and dealer patterns. I know Queens like the back of my hands because of it. And Peter let himself smile a bit brighter. And I'm proud of myself for getting this far on my own. I'm proud of myself every day I didn't die or help someone, because I don't rely on anyone but myself. I did it on my own. I got here on my own, and I'm helping people. I have no one to impress, no strings attached, Peter said with a nod, and looked at the mission and paused before continuing. Well, not entirely on my own. The guy who gave me this mission. Peter flicked the paper up quickly. He saved me once. I owe this to them. Peter smiled at Harley. Harley did not know what to say to that before he shook his head and smiled to himself. God, that's fucked up. That's fucking inspiring, man. You should write Disney movies, Harley said, with a shake of his head. It was corny, but made sense. Peter made sense. He didn't make sense at the same time. But that's okay, because Peter was okay. Or he would be once he got out of the fucking loop he's been in. Technically, Marvel is Disney, Peter said back, and Harley looked confused, and Peter laughed and shook his head. Never mind, I forgot you can't break the fourth wall. He snickered, and Harley snapped his arm playfully. Marvel? That's so stupid. Why would our universe be Marvel? Harley said with a snort, and Peter laughed. Ask the producers, he said, and Harley smirked. And Harley laughed at that. You're insane, man, he said good-naturedly, and Peter gave him a knowing smirk, but didn't retort. Maybe having Peter Parker as a friend wouldn't be that bad. It could never be easy, could it? He didn't enjoy the little things that happened in his life for long. He long since learned to cherish the things in the moment. Good things don't last long for him, but bad things always linger. In hindsight, he should have seen this coming. He should have known Parker Luck would just get rid of his past. Couldn't just get rid of his past so easily. That's on him. He admit that much. But this, he thinks he deserves a little warning before this type of shit happens. Was it too much to ask the universe? Apparently it was. I don't wanna. Last time it didn't go well. Peter whined, tugging on Fury's head. That hand I was gripping around his wrist all the way up to the elevator. He could tell the plane was getting on Fury's nerves, but it wasn't his fault. He was meeting someone new today, apparently. Another auxiliary Avenger, or whatever. He was still trying to adjust to the fucking king working with them. There's no way in hell he could get used to whoever this person was at the same moment. It was all a little too much, even for him. I don't care, Parker. We've got another mission, this time with rehabbed assets, Fury said again with a mumble. And Peter made a whining noise again, but didn't say that was the problem. Maybe if he annoyed Fury enough, he could get out of this due to Fury's temper. What he didn't count for was Fury's Peter Parker BS tolerance, which went up significantly since they had met. And though Peter was immensely proud of Fury for growing, it was a big damper when he didn't want to do something. It was hard to get out of things through annoyance alone. Stop calling people assets. It's degrading, Peter said, letting himself be dragged, going limp and trying to add extra weight to himself instantly so Fury would slow down or trip up. Needless to say, the method was insufficient due to logic and science. And why it's so important that I'm here? Fresh out of the barn, rehab people and snarky, annoying assholes don't mix well. Like, at all. Don't you think this little meeting should wait until, I don't know, never? Peter said as he pushed through the sleek doors into the conflict room where the debriefing was held. If Fury answered, he didn't hear it. He froze. The next thing he knew, Peter was pushed into the wall roughly, being held up by his neck. He didn't have time to react. He didn't have time to dodge. It just happened, and his spider sense was making his heart pump out of his chest and vision blurry, sending painful raps down his back, and yeah, he knew he was in danger. Thanks a lot, spider sense. You're forever my constant companion and savior. He was pushed into the wall by a person he didn't really want to remember, and really couldn't breathe, which, in life, is essential life function. Whether it was because of the choking or panic attack, he really wasn't sure. Maybe both, but yeah. Again, thanks for the heads up, SS. Spy Sense. You really are the MPV. He's been down before in much scary situations. Or maybe this was his most scary situation. Okay, we mix on that to theoretically scary situations. But this was different. Very and completely different. Usually people who pin him down aren't ex-Hydra assets who were trained him from ages 3 to 6, who were supposed to be dead, who he really did not remember at all. He could hear muffled screaming and talking noise. Everything but the face of his attacker was blurry. He was going to push back before a clear voice said, "How did you find me?" The voice scratched, that hoarse, scratchy voice said, rough and only sometimes gentle, coming as a horrifying clarification that this was very much real. That voice, he heard it before, though it didn't make itself known much. The thing it said was important. The words it said was that Peter built his life on. Peter can never forget that voice, low and gruffy, as if it was only used to speaking in grunts. No. How did Peter's voice was hoarse and dry? He lost all his breath as if he'd been winded. The crossed metal arm pushed against his throat, slamming into him again, making him gasp a little. Tears spraying in the corner of his eyes as he made a small choking sound. He never choked very loudly. That was just something he noticed about himself. He liked being strangled without yelling or loud noises, because he had to save the energy for breathing. No, not Soldier, nor Hydra. You can't go back. Hello, I'm Peter Parker. How did I ruin your life? Peter gasped out and never listening. Danny was that Soldier tore his life apart. Nearly 10 years ago, he didn't think the soldier hurt him regardless. Answer the question, the voice shouted, and Peter closed his eyes and tried to breathe. It was definitely a panic attack. At least he figured it out. He was like 68.32% sure. Hey, Buck, put Parker down. Nope, not the right thing to say. Shut the fuck up. Don't say that name. A single arm tightened. Peter made a slightly gasping, gagging sound in response. He's dangerous, Steve. Wow, such an honor. Being dangerous is one to Soldier. Too bad that compliment was out like a whole decade ago because he left him. Like, not the other way around, Soldier. You left me. No, he's not. Go on, degrade him like that. Thanks a lot, Steve. You know, he didn't work this hard to not be respected. It's not going really well, but that doesn't mean Steve couldn't appreciate his effort. He's a kid. Yeah, technically he didn't feel like one, especially when he was fucking dying at the hands of his old roommates. You left me alone there. Yeah, but he's not just a kid. Okay, Soldier, nope. Not spilling his uncomfortable secrets now. That's not what Hydra taught you. No, some information that's confidential for a reason, because he doesn't want anyone to know. And if Soldier spills, Peter has a lot of dirt on him too, so he better shut the fuck up. I trusted you. Remember your training. Rein in the evil Butsy, I'm just a kid. Peter choked out, remembering to speak English, because when he spoke in English, Soldier always seemed less stressed. The head snapped to him from the ringing over the cap and crushed his neck once more, as would tell him to shut up. Like he didn't get to say, yeah, but when did you ever get to say? God, it made a good point. He barely had room to breathe, as tapped twice in the middle of himself. He needed to go. Just two taps. Please let me go. 2 taps. I don't want to fight you anymore. 2 taps. I don't want to fight you. 2 taps. I don't want to fight. 2 taps. Please don't make me fight. 2 taps. It's not up to me, tap. The group listened and instantly loosened, releasing him from his oxygen-lacking prison. Peter fell on his knees, coughing softly and the rubbing feeling back into his throat. It was still hard to breathe. So 100% suddenly a panic attack. Okay, he had to go. Buck, he heard Steve ask cautiously. He didn't see the soldier stumble back or about Steve catching him as Peter tried to catch a breath. He didn't want to hear this conversation. Who was he? Peter instantly felt panic at Soldier's soft question. The tone was soft, but it was loud in his ears, and Peter shut his eyes and tried to breathe. It's easier to say in English, Spider-Man, he joked out, not letting anyone answer for him. And you're the fucking weak Winter Soldier. Wow, Bond, right? The excitement was dampened by his draining, hoarse voice, and look up and see the Avengers flinch, and some even took a step forward to maybe help him, then thought against it, so he could breathe. Smart choice, but at that he felt the soldier stiffen. How do you know my name? Peter tried to straighten up, but briefly glanced at Buck from where he sat. Breath almost came back to him, and now he had some control over the situation. Who are you fooling? You don't have any control on what goes on in your life. Where did you get that idiotic thought? I went to school sometimes, he muttered. He looked pointedly anywhere except an animated being, and Cap looked fierce. We learned about you, during World War II unit. Peter rolled his eyes, grinning, gaining back his composure as he started to ignore Soldier's presence. Why, Terminator go AWOL in the kid? Peter Tony asked, casually pointing the pen in his hand gently between the two raised eyebrow and eyes, showing over his sunglasses and tilted down off his head, voicing the question everyone was wondering. Voicing the question Peter was dreading. He wanted everyone to forget about him, forget about the situation, but he never got to be that lucky, was he? Because he remembered me after all. He reminds me of someone, he said uncertainly, almost like he was scared. Peter couldn't help but stare up at him and wonder. The soldier was only scared once that Peter had saw. He didn't notice as he went completely still, his heart pounding at a erratic rate. I wasn't sure if he was dead, Bucky muttered, and Peter rolled his eyes, trying to gain some sense of himself. He couldn't allow himself to panic. It would look suspicious, and he hadn't done it since he was a kid. The soldier looked at him with a haunted look of someone who they thought was a ghost. Same dude. Oh my god, that's not a club. Right. Like, I remind you of someone, I probably pissed you off somehow. Peter said under his breath in an incredulous drone. Bucky looked at him, panicked and confused, and just said, which gross, but he sucked. Ew, get it away. Oops, he must have heard him. No, you did. Peter had stopped as he had to go. He had to leave and not come back until he screamed and cried at all these feelings. He stood up promptly. The soldier stumbled back in a little in shock. Don't worry, piss everyone off. It's kind of my thing. Peter announced proudly, puffing out his chest like he was anything. He was anything but proud of himself for that. It was because he didn't mean to piss anyone off. He just had to do things that did sometimes read all the time. He didn't want to be not to be liked. It made it hard for him to have a good self-esteem. It made it hard for him to do anything involving interacting with people. It made it hard to form connections. Now, you don't have, idiot, but it's lonely. You should go. You probably should before this gets messy. Well, at least visibly so. It's a room off that Barnes remembered him, sorta. When they were in the room, he didn't even know Peter existed half the time after a certain point. And they fucking lived together, trained together, ate together, slept together. He was the only one at a place if Soldier wasn't there. He was always there, and then he left. Ripped apart Peter's only semblance of civilian shreds, and didn't even bother to remember his own name. After all these years, he comes back having flashes of times Peter wanted so desperately to forget. They spent so long trying not to remember. He couldn't afford to remember it. He couldn't afford to be that distracted and out of it. Not on the field, not before a mission or job, especially not in front of the Avengers. And Peter was getting better in his own weird way. He was finally settling. He was getting into routine. His life wasn't changing too much. He was gaining the courage to finally feel comfortable. As far as he could see, literally only seconds ago, it would have been changing a lot before now. He had been lying to fate when they had found him after the glitter bomb. This was rock bottom. This was the fucking bad decision or event that would spiral the rest of his few months into a year into a clusterfuck of feelings and emotions and all the things he had been trying to avoid for nearly a decade. Now his life was set to take many different courses, many different painful courses. Now he was on a twisty road and he couldn't see the outcome. It was going to take forever to be a straight road again. If it had ever been straight to begin with, maybe it was, but Peter could close his eyes and not have to worry about anything as he was driving for on this metaphorical road. Now he had to actually look where he was driving because people were on his road again. This was a metaphorical road that was giving him anxiety now. What the hell was his life anymore? He was going through a fucking existential crisis here. So basically, the world wasn't spinning off its axis. What a load of bull. I'm sorry. The soldier offered, and that threw Peter way off. But he was already off the metaphorical road he was on. This guy fucking decked him as a 5-year-old, sliced him up in combat training, to the point where his skin was more score than flesh, threw him against jagged cages in the area they spawned in, yelled, screamed profanities when he was trying to sleep. He pointed a gun at to his head right before he left for years and didn't say anything. Stripped of all innocence and sanity, made him an emotional shell that he was left to fill by himself because no one cared anymore. And now he was saying sorry. He never said sorry before. He never said sorry when it actually meant something. Now he's throwing Peter against the wall and looking apologetic. Like that would change anything he's taken away. Peter didn't buy that crap for a second. Been very worse, he said easily. Waving him off, he felt breathless, like he was trying to act like he wasn't breaking down. He usually looked. But it wasn't working, happens, he said, trying to sound casual. It wasn't working with his voice, his hoarse voice. And he blamed on the joking section. Hopefully the soldier and everyone else did too. If he did, he didn't care. He had to go. Reminds you of times I said, no, I'm really sorry. I don't think I ever said that to him before. Well, that means a lot now, thanks. I think he'd be around your age. His eyes flicked to Natasha briefly, and Peter followed the gaze. Natasha looked sad, and it was kind of the same look she used when she told about her, oh shit, they think that kid was her son. Probably for good reasons. They wouldn't jump to a conclusion unless they had a good reason. It was pretty far-fetched and totally impossible, so they would have to have a really good reason, especially the Black Widow and Winter Soldier had that reason. It was like a 97% set in stone, and probably true because they were looking into it for like ever, but at least they had a bigger lead than what they lent on. Well, he helped, they found him. Wait, you're the kid in the room, idiot. You're her son. Oh no. Peter turned white. I have to go. His breath was short now. Like, visible even, as if he just caught his breath. He couldn't do this here. He had to get out. He looked at Natasha one more time and confirmed that he thought that they thought his son was. It also confirmed something else. She glanced at Barnes. No way. The soldier was his. No, this can't be happening. This can't be true. That's my mom. That's my dad. They're my parents. Peter was on the verge of a panic attack. He probably was already having one. Someone must have news because Fury had sent to pull him out of that. Thank God. The relief was short-lived. What the hell was that? Fury screamed, his face enraged, and Peter yanked his arm out of Fury's hold harshly and stumbled. The world blurred for a moment. Didn't focus all the way, and Peter resigned that this was a good reason, as his vision was going to be. Black Widow is my mom. I have to go, he said quickly, muttering, trying to find a way out. Outside, his eyes zeroed in on the window. He made a beeline for it. Something grabbed him on the middle and lifted him a little. The Winter Soldier's my dad. He couldn't fucking breathe. Oh no. Yeah, under these. Stark said, and Peter tried to push away for one. He needed to get out of here. He didn't want to do this here. I can't do this. Not today. Not ever. Never, ever. Never, ever again. Can we reschedule? His voice pitched an octave. He didn't like that. But who cares what you like? Who cares what you think? No one cares if you're comfortable. They don't care that. No one ever has. What makes you think that What makes you think anyone ever will? That was a bad voice. This wasn't good. This wasn't fucking good. We have to talk. The outside voices were muffled with the inside ones. They brought the soldier back. Explain what happened. Was that the inside voice? He was going to take you to Hydra. He's not responding. He needs to think. They're going to be angry you left. He's not a fucking computer, Fury. He needs it to be quiet. They're not going to kill you. Just answer us. Shut up. They're going to destroy you. No. Peter screamed, and there was a snap, and then silence. Okay, I'm back. I'm gonna be honest, I forgot that I recorded half of, 2 hours of this, and then I came back on here after, a week after I recorded the other bits, and, I just kind of forgot to do this, so I'm sorry, but I just finished it, and I will try to post the next chapter soon. Also, school has started, actually, so I'm stuck in the living room trying to record this, unless it's the weekend, and my dog is always out in the living room, so if you hear any sound in the background, it's probably him or my parents are coming out, which would absolutely suck. But I'm going to see you next time, I guess. Bye.